At the age of 80, Burt Lancaster was said to finally loosen his grip on the secrets that had followed him for half a century. Friends recalled late-night candor, a man looking back at the damage secrecy could do, and the people he'd loved anyway. The names that circulate are thunderous: Cary Grant, Rock Hudson, Marlon Brando, even J. Edgar Hoover, and they arrive with a warning label. Much of it is rumor, some of it plausible, and none of it definitively proven. But in a town where silence was survival, the absence of proof is part of the story. Old Hollywood enforced a code. Contracts had morality clauses. Studios planted stories and buried others. If a star stepped outside the script, a fixer drove in the night. That's why the whispers around Lancaster never stopped. He was magnetic, loyal, and fiercely private, and privacy invites speculation. So we'll set the rules up front, call the claims what they are, show the receipts we do have, and let you weigh the rest. Here's the promise: no padded filmography, no slow lead-ups. We stay in the rooms where decisions were made. Private doors, borrowed hideouts, long drives where the only witnesses were sand and moonlight. We'll talk about why a star like Lancaster could be adored by women, pursued by men, and still refuse to let anyone turn his life into a weapon. And we'll explain how the cost of secrecy wasn't just fear of headlines. It was the constant negotiation of who gets to know the real you. In that negotiation, Lancaster chose loyalty first. Careers are rebuilt. People are not. In the 1940s and 50s, a public admission of loving a man could end a career. Studios kept surveillance on their own stars. Magazines posed actors in staged domestic spreads to drown out rumors, and agents negotiated marriages that looked tidy in print. In that climate, a bisexual or gay actor survived by compartmentalizing. Play the role, guard the heart, trust a small circle. Lancaster's biographer Kate Buford said she chased the stories for years and hit a hall of mirrors. People who swore something happened, then backed away. And a subject who never drew a line because he refused to imply that being gay was lesser. That posture, don't label, don't shame, says as much as any confession. Hollywood didn't merely discourage honesty, it punished it. Agents warned clients never to put anything suggestive on paper. Studio security kept logs of who arrived and who left. A studio press office could send a photographer to a dinner date and plant the shots in fan magazines by the weekend. For actors who felt attraction across the spectrum, the safest answer was no answer. Lancaster adopted a version of that policy and stuck to it for life. He wasn't coy. He was protective of himself, of friends, of the idea that love shouldn't be dragged into court just to prove innocence. That's why people who knew him describe warmth without interrogation. He would ask about your work, your kids, your hopes, and he would give advice with that big-shouldered confidence and never return the question in a way that put you on the spot. Start with the most glamorous rumor. The tale goes that Lancaster and Cary Grant collided at an industry party in the late 1940s, traded that famous grin for Grant's equally famous poise, and found space along the coast where the cameras couldn't reach. What keeps this story alive is context. Grant lived for years with Randolph Scott. Studios alternated between exploiting and suppressing that domestic pairing. The two men were photographed cooking, sunbathing, sharing a home, and the images looked like a dare wrapped in charm. If Grant fought for privacy his entire life, you can see why any bond with Lancaster, another superstar who prized control, would be shielded by locked doors and trusted friends. Still, there's no document, no letter, no photo. Just a rumor that fits the era a little too well. Grant remains the great unsolved equation of classic Hollywood. 5 marriages, a lifetime of whispers, and photos with Randolph Scott that radiate domestic ease. Aprons, armchairs, sun on stucco. He was a master of control. The voice, the tailoring, the timing. Picture him with Lancaster, another technician who understood image like architecture. The story of Pacific Coast Highway hideaways has texture that seduces. A borrowed beach place, curtains drawn, dawn swims before the neighbors woke. If it happened, it would have been brief and carefully contained. The risk for Grant was existential. A single exposure could flip a career into a cautionary tale. That fear, more than lack of feeling, explains the short but unforgettable shape the rumor always takes. Then there's the name that always stuns audiences. Hoover, the FBI director who treated Hollywood as both ally and target, appears in modern lists as a Lancaster connection. The temptation is obvious. The most guarded man in Washington attached to one of the most guarded men in Hollywood. But here, the smoke is mostly from other fires. Has been debated for decades, and reputable historians say the truth is nearly impossible to pin down. Add a star's mystique, and the rumor multiplies. Could they have met at a Capitol gala? Certainly. Hoover moved in those rooms and liked the company of celebrities. Did the bond go further? There's no credible proof, and the myth's persistence mostly reflects how power and secrecy attract stories to themselves. Hoover's name survives because secrecy craves company. Reporters tried for years to pin him down and mostly found contradictions. He kept a long partnership with Clyde Tolson that looked like devotion, whether or not it was physical. He policed public morality while collecting private leverage. Put him in a room with a movie star and you get a perfect myth engine. Lancaster, politically outspoken and stubbornly independent, would have fascinated him. Yet, the record that matters, memos, diaries, witness corroboration, never surfaces. In the end, the Hoover rumor tells you less about Lancaster's heart and more about America's obsession with the private lives of men who hold power. The rumor that carries the most gravity links Lancaster with Rock Hudson, the era's gentlest giant. The two men moved through the same studios and circles in the early 1950s, and private accounts picture desert drives, borrowed houses, and the kind of quiet you can only buy far from town. Whether they were lovers can't be proven. What is proven is the moment, 30 years later, when Lancaster stood at a microphone and read Hudson's words to a glittering ballroom, a plea for compassion, funding, and urgency, as a new epidemic ripped through communities while much of the industry looked away. That night, September 19, 1985, Lancaster used his gravitas to make people listen. Labels aside, loyalty is measurable. This was it, in public, when it mattered. Hudson's case cuts deeper because it intersects with tragedy and courage. By the mid-1980s, talk show punchlines and cruel headlines surrounded anyone linked to the epidemic. Hudson's public acknowledgement shook Hollywood. Lancaster stepping up to read that letter was more than star solidarity. It was a signal to the business that decency outranks fear. Watch the clip and you hear a voice that doesn't wobble. He calls for funding, for compassion, for the industry to stop pretending. Whatever the truth of their private bond, this public moment is an act of care you can verify. It's the kind of choice a friend makes when he knows his reputation is the least important thing in the room. If anyone could match Lancaster's voltage, it was Marlon Brando. Stories describe a pull between them that was half debate, half dare. Two leading men testing each other's edges. Here, the one solid fact is Brando's own openness. In 1976, he said he'd had relationships with men and wasn't ashamed, a remark that made headlines and then became part of his legend. Link that candor to Lancaster's aura, and you get a rumor built to last. But again, proof? Nothing on paper. Just a plausible chemistry between a rebel who admitted fluidity and a friend who never corrected anyone for saying the word. Brando brought volatility with him everywhere. He flirted with interviewers, mocked convention, and admitted what many only hinted at. Imagine the conversations. Lancaster pushing for discipline and control. Brando arguing for freedom and impulse. Both men aware that the other represented a path he could have taken. Rumors of a romance feel almost like fan fiction written by people who wanted two supernovas to collide. If they did, the explosion left no fragments. What remains is the tantalizing overlap. Parties, premieres, political causes, and the knowledge that in a different world, neither of them would have needed to hide anything. The most delicate rumor connects Lancaster with pop idol Ricky Nelson, nearly 2 decades younger and moving from teen heartthrob to adult artist. The story frames Lancaster as mentor and protector, someone who understood what fame does to a young man and tried to shield him from the roughest parts. It's a narrative that mirrors how many older stars treated younger colleagues they liked. Care, coaching, quiet generosity. But because this claim relies almost entirely on private anecdotes, you have to bracket it with caution. What it does reveal, though, is how people saw Lancaster. Magnetic to men as well as women. A figure others orbited because he made them feel seen. Even Jackie Bone, his longtime mistress, said men loved him almost better than women. Ricky Nelson was a different kind of risk. Youth, idol pressure, the hunger to grow up under a microscope. The rumor of a brief romance often comes packaged with tenderness. Lancaster easing the boy out of rooms where the wolves hunted, reminding him he was allowed to set boundaries. There's a sweetness to that story that makes it durable. It flatters both men. The older star as guardian, the younger as a soul searching for space to breathe. Yet durability isn't proof. Treat it as a window into how colleagues read Lancaster's instincts, protective, fond of mentoring, and aware of how public fantasy can crush private life. Rumors about men existed alongside public relationships with women. Lancaster married circus acrobat June Ernst. The road life that shaped them also wore them out. With Norma Anderson, he built a family of 5 and a home that doubled as a civil rights hub. Fundraisers, leaflets, long conversations about change. After the marriage ended in 1969, the passionate, chaotic years with Jackie Bone arrived, including the notorious party where she smashed a bottle over his head in front of industry heavyweights. In 1990, he married Susan Martin, the calm harbor after storms. None of this erases the whispers, it complicates them. People contain multitudes, and Lancaster never pretended otherwise. The chaos with Jackie Bone exploded precisely because both people felt everything at full volume. Friends said they could go from laughter to sparks in a minute. The famous bottle incident is remembered because it is cinematic. A crowded party, a flash of anger, glass, shock. But even this tabloid-coded moment folds into a bigger truth. Lancaster didn't retreat from hard relationships. He stayed, argued, apologized, tried to do better, then sometimes failed again. When the late marriage to Susan Martin finally brought quiet, it felt like a man choosing peace as an achievement, not a surrender. When you strip away the lists and look at the receipts, a pattern emerges. August 28, 1963. He's photographed beside James Baldwin at the March on Washington, having flown in to lend his voice and his name. September 1985. He reads Rock Hudson's message to Hollywood, urging a frightened industry to act with decency. Through the years, he supports civil liberties groups, takes heat for standing with colleagues targeted by political committees, and refuses to deny friends to make himself look straighter. That's the through line, choosing people over optics. There are 3 reasons why the rumors have lasted. First, Lancaster protected his privacy, which creates a vacuum. Second, the men named Grant, Hudson, Brando carried their own clouds of secrecy and revelation, so lines between their legends blur. Third, audiences today read old images differently. A studio photo of 2 men sharing a beach house looks bolder now than it did then. Put those pieces together, and the story keeps regenerating online, especially when a new video promises the 4 names he confessed at 80. The biographical record doesn't confirm such a confession. What it does confirm is a man who refused to shame anyone by distancing himself. That stance is rare enough to sound like revelation. Modern audiences also have a new toolkit. We read the old coded language, confirmed bachelors, roommates, lifelong companions, and translate what publicists hoped we wouldn't. We notice who deflected and who defended. We study which rumors align with timelines and which ones crumple. With Lancaster, the timelines intersect just enough to keep believers believing. The lack of documentation frustrates, but it also honors the reality of that era. People protected each other by leaving no trail. If you want an answer stamped in ink, old Hollywood almost never gives it to you. It gives you ellipses. He seemed happy. They were close. They were often together. And sometimes, that's all the truth that survives. Heart trouble narrowed his world in the 1980s. After surgery and a stroke, he spent more time at home, still writing checks, still making calls, still showing up when a cause needed a voice. On October 20th, 1994, at 4:50 a.m., Burt Lancaster died in Los Angeles at 80. As he'd asked, there was no funeral. His ashes were scattered beneath a big oak at Westwood, a small plaque marking a giant life. The privacy he guarded in life held in death. The rumors didn't vanish, but they softened into a different kind of legacy. The idea that a star could be complicated, generous, fiery, and faithful to friends without ever submitting to a label he thought could hurt them. That, in the end, might be the clearest truth he left. The last years tell you how he wanted to be remembered. No dramatic press conferences, no tell-all, just a steady tapering of public life, a final marriage, and instructions for a quiet farewell. Westwood is a small cemetery packed with legends, yet his spot reads modestly, as if he wanted visitors to think about a film or a moment of courage instead of marble. That small plaque under the oak carries a big message. Some stories matter more for how they made people feel than for how they can be footnoted. With Lancaster, the feeling that remains is steadiness. Toward friends, toward causes, toward a dignity he refused to surrender. So, did he love men? The fairest answer is that many believed he did, some swore they knew, and he never offered the closure the gossip machine demands. What we can measure are the choices. The fundraiser before the march, the Baldwin moment, the letter for Hudson, the refusal to draw a line that would make someone else smaller. A legend is the stories people tell when the lights go down. Lancaster's story leaves us with this. Even in an era built on denial, he tried to be brave in the ways that counted, and the people who needed that bravery never forgot. So when you hear a video swear it has the 4 names he confessed, remember the biographer who spent years looking and found a fog that never quite parted. That doesn't mean the stories are false. It means they belong to a time when love needed better laws and kinder eyes. Lancaster couldn't change the era, but he could model a way to live in it. Protect people, take risks for what's right, and never let shame do your speaking. If you carry anything from his story, carry that. If this story moved you, look again at the photos from 1963 and watch that 1985 clip. You'll see a man who chose people over perfection. Maybe that's the real reveal at 80, not a list of partners, but a final acceptance that love in any form deserved protection. If you want more untold histories like this, hit subscribe and tell us who to investigate next.